I didn't know what to make of it, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I thought, I'll write a novel. When we write fiction, we take objects, experiences, people, and we change them. In this case, the envelope became a Florsheim shoebox, and the envelope's contents became the inspiration for this book. Now, in a form of fiction that will reflect what I just said, I'll read a little bit from the prologue of the book. Charlotte sat on the bed regarding the Florsheim shoebox with equal measures of anticipation and resistance. She had noticed it over the years up on a high ledge of her mother's closet, and may have wondered every now and then while she was growing up why it was there. A man's shoebox was singularly out of place in their female household. But she never asked about it. It would be like finding a bottle of aftershave in the medicine chest, something that just did not belong, but whose explanation for being there she really did not want to know. Now she sat on one of the twin beds in her mother's bedroom regarding the shoebox. "You are old enough to know," her mother had tersely announced moments after Charlotte had come upon it. She had been going in search of a sweater when the unexpected object on the bed stopped her in her tracks. Of course, she didn't have to think for even one split second about what this was. It was the Florsheim shoebox that had sat high on a ledge in her mother's closet for the entirety of her childhood, and which, whatever it might contain, she always had a feeling that the least likely possibility was shoes. But why was it here? What was she supposed to do with it? It was at that puzzling moment that her mother had appeared in the doorway and made her terse statement. "You are old enough to know." The declaration contained 4 words more. It was your father's. Old enough to know. Charlotte was 27. She had a master's degree in art history, a boyfriend, a job she was looking forward to, and a pretty optimistic little attitude. Her confidence wasn't based on anything in particular. It was just the way she was. Some might consider her annoyingly sunny. One of those people would be her mother, who tended toward a more cautious worldview. The box had no cover. Charlotte sifted through its contents warily. Her father, who had died of a sudden heart attack when she was a toddler, was firmly entrenched in her imagination as a hero. Worshipping his memory and what a perfect dad he would have been comprised the entirety of the relationship she wanted to have with him. Though a naturally inquisitive person, she really wasn't all that interested in learning things about her father that might tarnish the idol. He was dead. She had had to grow up without a father who was dead. Didn't she deserve to keep his image sacrosanct? Photographs. Who were these people? A pretty young woman and a small boy. One piece of paper was so delicate it nearly crumbled between her fingers. A government document of some kind. A congressional deportation hearing? Other sheets of paper, similarly fragile, were written entirely in Polish. Really, sunny Charlotte couldn't help but feel irritated. What was she supposed to do with all this stuff? Sit down now at 8 o'clock on some random night in September and learn the ins and outs of her father's life story? She didn't feel old enough to know, not just yet. And so after her cursory perusal, she shoved the box away from her, grabbed her cardigan, and opened the bedroom door. It would be years before she revisited the box, organized its contents according to date, found a translator, and put together an understanding of the road her father had taken to give her life. The novel, which takes place in the years between 1929 and 1946, is divided into sections, and each section represents a year. So there's 1929, 1932, 1937, 1939, and then the epilogue, which is in 1946. Each section is subtitled with a phrase that resonates with the political realities of today. Frankly, this is a story about immigration, which is certainly something we're all thinking about today. I want to just take a little tangent here, since I've been granted a little more time. We've all heard probably of the rave Broadway hit called Hamilton. It's now telling the story of our founding fathers in hip-hop. And the author of the book Hamilton, upon which the Broadway play and musical were based, Ron Chernow, recently said something that really resonated with me, and that was that the American story is the saga of outsiders trying to become insiders. Now, Alexander Hamilton himself was an immigrant. He was not born in the United States. He was born in St. Croix. And so it is my hope that this novel that I've written will contribute to our understanding of the immigrant experience. Now, in part 1, 1929, I introduce Yankel Himmelbaum and Will Brown, the two citizens of the title. Here we learn why Yankel is forced to lie in order to get into the United States, and why Will is so dedicated to protecting the country he loves from foreigners. This section is called The Path to Citizenship. And just in the section that I'm going to read to you right now, just before leaving for the United States, this explains the lie that Yankel had to tell. Just before leaving for the United States, which he has dreamed of doing since a boy, and he of course lives in Poland, 20-year-old Yankel Himmelbaum learns from his girlfriend that she's pregnant. He postpones his trip, takes her hand. They go together to the nearby synagogue to have a religious wedding ceremony. Now, on his visa, it says that he is unmarried, and according to the quota requirements, that's the only way he can get into the country. It looked as though everything was taken care of. Reisel's parents and Reisel herself gave thanks that the relationship was sealed and that the child would be legitimate in the eyes of God. But a few days after the issuing of the ketubah, the Jewish marriage license, it was Rabbi Braun himself who came to the Lansky apartment in Lukov, where the newlyweds were living with her parents. He came all the way from Vladova, a noteworthy event since no one had ever known the rabbi to leave the small village. Seeing him at the front door, therefore, of the Lansky apartment, Yankel's heart sank. Something must be terribly wrong. "This is a shanda for the goyim," the rabbi said, getting right to the point. "Anyone can see the girl is expecting." Anyone but her boyfriend, now husband, Yankel thought. "You must do the decent thing," the rabbi was saying, "and get the civil certificate, period." "But my papers," Yankel tried to reason with the spiritual leader. He even took the visa from his jacket pocket in the closet and showed it to the rabbi. "You see here, it says unmarried. That is the only way they will allow me in." "I don't know what it says or doesn't say," the rabbi insisted, waving off this piece of paper from a land he deeply suspected would be the ruin of the Jewish people. "You will do the right thing by your wife and," he paused to convey the magnitude of the words he was about to speak, "your child." And so, against his better judgment, and fearing that he might be digging a grave for his plans, digging a grave in the name of marriage and birth, Yankel was shamed by the rabbi into making his marriage official, legal. "Okay," he said, beaten, but careful to return the visa to his jacket pocket. "But my parents, they must not find out about the child, about the marriage, anything. They would be so disappointed and frightened knowing I have to lie to get into America." Visions of immigration officials filled Yankel's head, all the questions he knew he'd have to answer. The non-quota visa was clearly made out to the unmarried son of Iko Himmelbaum, unmarried. The word was pressed into his mind like a government stamp, an official rebuke of his every deed. He knew he was doing the right thing, but this right thing at the very same time became criminal the moment he stepped foot in America. Now, at the same time that this marriage is taking place, in a very small town in Poland, thousands and thousands of miles away in a town called Iowa City, another marriage is taking place, and that is the marriage between Will Brown and his high school sweetheart, Barbara. They've waited to get married until he could finish law school And she's been very dutiful in that way. She kind of tries to cater to Will's needs. And even though she's very attached to Iowa and being a Midwestern girl, she knows that they're going to be moving to New York because he has just gotten a job that he has always coveted, and that is to be a special inquiry inspector at Ellis Island. It was 3 in the afternoon and Will toweled off. He'd have to hurry to make his 3 o'clock deportation interview. Rushing past one of the dorm rooms that housed the women awaiting hearings, he could make out the familiar moans of fear and bewilderment emanating from that area. He heard the sound so regularly it had just become a part of the place, a part of the ambiance of his workday. Grabbing a cup of tea from the staff dining room, vast and just about empty at this hour, Will made his way through the breezeway that connected Island Number 2 to the main building. More and more, Will's job as a special inquiry inspector involved deportation interviews, and his assignment this afternoon was to determine whether a certain Reva Lansky was making trouble over at her dressmaking plant. Like the majority of potential deportees, she had been on the island for weeks awaiting her hearing. There she was, sitting by herself in the cubicle allotted for the examination. "Miss Lansky," Will said by way of greeting as he scraped the chair from behind the desk and sat down. "I see you have forgone your right to legal counsel." "You should be ashamed the conditions here," the heavy-set woman with the gaunt face accused by way of her greeting. Will, leafing through her paperwork, did not respond. "You treat people like animals, if you ask me. Bars on the windows, for God's sake. You got it set up like a jail." Will remained focused on the document. Reva Lansky, age 31. Arrival from Ukraine, 1925. Occupation, seamstress. Marital status, single. Home address, Brooklyn, with 2 sisters and uncle. Suspected of incitement to overthrow the government. Inspector's recommendation remained blank. "You choose, Miss Lansky, to represent yourself at this hearing?" Will asked again, this time for the record. "You choose, Mr. Whatever your name is, to ask obvious questions?" Well, one thing was obvious. Miss Lansky had no compunctions about antagonizing her interrogator. "I'm William Brown," he said. "Glad to make your acquaintance." Reva shifted in her seat. "You've been here how long?" he asked. "What, can't you read? Maybe you should be deported," Reva shot back. Will cleared his throat. "All right, Miss Lansky, there's no need to make this any less pleasant for yourself." "What is that, a threat?" "Just answer the question." "For almost 5 years I came because they, the communists, don't like the Jews any more than the Tsar did. So I came to the land of fairness and opportunity." "And what exactly are your complaints against the United States government?" Will asked, finally looking up at her. "Complaints? How long have you got, Mr. Inspector Brown?" "I'll ask the questions, Miss Lansky." "That's the problem over here, if you ask me. Freedom of speech, it says all over, but it seems to me a person says what they believe, they can get in a whole lot of trouble. Especially if what they believe don't match the program." "The program? To which program would you be referring?" "The take advantage of the greenhorn program. The work their fingers to the bone program. That's what program. We come over believing the streets are paved with gold, and then bango," she clapped her hands. "You stick us in dark rooms, squeeze us together like sardines, and hand us a needle. You see that buttonhole on your fine shirt?" Will looked down at his shirt despite himself. "Yeah, any one of those buttonholes. Are they wet, Mr. Inspector Brown? Wet with tears and sweat?" "Because that's what they're made of. That's the thread we use." Will wrote something down. "So you take issue with the conditions of your employment?" "Yeah, issue I take." Reva's voice had lowered, her toughness instantly punctured by the image she had just described of the sweatshop conditions she and her sisters and her neighbors and every female she knew endured day in and day out. Supposedly the unions changed everything, and of course things were better than 30 years ago, so big deal, things were still rotten. But at least the union was better than nothing. Of course, from Will's perspective, these people had a hell of a nerve complaining. There wasn't any place on earth as prosperous as his country, the very country he had no way of knowing that in a few short months would see its entire economic structure collapse. "Tell me about New Year's Day, Miss Lansky," Will read and homed in on the charge against her. "New Year's Day of this year." "What, you think I had a hangover? I don't drink, mister." You know what I'm referring to. What Will was referring to was the Needle Trades Industrial Union, formed on New Year's Day in 1929, and clearly willing to be led by communists. "So I joined a union. So what?" Riva picked at her nails, already bitten almost to the cuticle. "And you are aware that this is a so-called revolutionary union?" "Who cares what it's called? They help us make more money, make better our working conditions. Let them call themselves what they want." "Are you interested in overturning the United States government, Miss Lansky?" This was the nub of the interrogation. Riva had to laugh. It's not that she wasn't aware of the leadership and its communist affiliations, but she, barely putting 2 cents together, was she going to overturn America? What was wrong with this country, that this man could sit here and say such a ridiculous thing? Well, she knew why she was here, the accusations against her. You laugh, Miss Lansky, but these are serious charges. Will got to the point, the answer to which must determine his decision. "Are you willing to disavow your membership in this treasonous organization?" He looked at her squarely, his pen poised to record her answer. "Been in this hellhole for 3 weeks, almost 4, and always the same question." "This is the last time you'll have to answer it," Will said darkly. "I assure you." "You'd send me back." Riva met his gaze. "You know the law," but Will repeated it to her anyway. "Any immigrant in this country for less than 5 years can be deported for cause." Riva's voice became dry and quiet. "I left the Ukraine when the communists took over. That Stalin is trouble. Do you think I want to go back?" Will said nothing. "You're good at what you do," Riva said to him. "I've been questioned many times, but I can tell you are serious. You would send me back. You'd sign that paper ordering my deportation without blinking. What made you so hard, Mr. Inspector Brown?" "I'm a patriotic American, no more, no less." Will waited for her answer. "Well?" Riva had had plenty of time to go over her options. She believed in the new union, applauded its no-nonsense approach to improving working conditions. But if she continued her membership, they would deport her. What would she have at home? Nothing. Nobody. Her parents were dead. Her sisters were here. Still, she wouldn't give this bastard the satisfaction of backing down so easily. "You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Inspector Brown. Maybe you should be in the union with your talent for bargaining. Ever thought about that?" "What will it be, Miss Lansky?" Will pressed. He tapped his pen impatiently and sighed to drive home the urgency of her situation. "I can't go back," Riva answered quietly. "And you're willing to sever all ties to this union?" It was Riva's turn to sigh. "So I'll sever." "You'll sign a document to that effect?" "I told you, I'll sever, I'll sign." "You understand this will be a legal document. You will be signing under penalty of perjury. If we find that you've remained active with this union, you will have lied to the government of the United States of America." Riva tried to conjure her previous defiance. "No, so it's against the law to lie?" "Oh, yes, it certainly is." Will Brown couldn't have spoken more clearly. It's a very serious offense to lie to the United States government. A short distance away in an area of the Great Hall designated for incoming immigrants, Yankel Himmelbaum was taking his entry tests. He passed the literacy test handily, as well as the medical one. He had read 20 words of the U.S. Constitution in the language of his choice, English. Now, he'd been sitting on a bench for 3 hours waiting to go through the legal inspection. When he finally heard his name, he walked with head held high and placed himself before the interrogator. One by one, he answered each question. Age, 20. Nationality, Polish. Race, Jewish. By whom was passage paid? Father. Proposed place of residence? Bronx, New York. Married? No. And thus the battle lines are drawn between an illegal immigrant desperate to stay in this country and the American official determined to keep him out. As we follow their parallel stories over the course of a decade, there is one other thing that is a link between the two men and that comes between them, and that is that they both fall in love with the same woman. Okay, so, questions?
You know, was it really back then, race, being Jewish was listed there, like now?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, and that will come up later in the deportation hearing, that why are we calling Judaism a race? That is the most polite dog. Didn't yell through my whole reading. Thank you must be a Jewish dog. But anyway, yes, it was until, I don't know when they changed it, but Judaism was listed as a race.
Wow.
And people still question that. Is it a religion? Is it a race? You know, are we a tribe? You know. But yes, it was part of the legal documentation. Any other questions? Yes.
Question. How did you come up with the title? How did you come up with the title?
Well, I love the word citizen. I think we all would like to feel like citizens and be treated like citizens. And it has to do not only with, you know, your geographical location, but just rather than feeling like an outsider, you know, you want to feel that you belong. So I love that word. And it is a tale because, you know, one of the most common questions I'm asked is how much of this is your father's story and why didn't you just write your father's story? And it is kind of interesting because Father Loss, which was my other book, my earlier book, was an attempt to understand the impact of his absence, and this book you could say is an attempt to give him a life. So I didn't have his life in front of me. I did have these photographs, and I had to surmise a lot. I asked relatives questions, but I didn't want it to have to pretend to be a true account. Okay, so that's answering my question, and answer to your question. So it's a tale. It's a tale of two citizens. And only once, when we were shooting the Vimeo, we did several takes. And finally one went well. I remember to mention Poland and Barbara, and you know, there would always be something I'd leave out. And I finished, and I knew we had it, and I said, a tale of two cities. I can't even say a tale of two cities. I was like, oh my God, I have to do it again. But I just said citizens. So it's like citizens has become, you know, it's always a little risky to riff on an already well-known title, but, and of course, a Tale of Two Cities is also really about citizenship. So it kind of overlapped, and that was the title. You know, sometimes you just hit on the title and that's it. So that's how I came to it. And I really appreciate, I must say, this was not the first cover, and quite unusually and much to my appreciation, when the publisher presented me with the first cover, and of course when you've written a novel, all you want on earth is to be published. You're so happy, you don't care what it's going to look like, and then they show you a cover and it's like, no, that will not be the cover of my book. So, and they heard me, and so they went back to the drawing board, as it were, and they came up with this, and I just love it, not only because they're kind of, I mean, from here you probably can't see it, but you can just see the silhouettes of these two men, but I love because this is kind of like putting the papers together to try to get the unruly content into some kind of acceptable story and coherent story. So that was how I got to it. Kathleen.
Oh, I have a question about your mother. When you, this isn't really about the book, but it is about the book.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a sister. How did you both feel? I mean, about your mother after finding all this, and what had your mother told you about your father?
Well, I don't want to give away how things turn
Okay,
out.
okay. No, I know you don't want, so it's a tricky
And
question.
I had, and this again, there was no foreshowing
No,
shoebox
no.
in reality. There was really this envelope. I
Right.
mean, and so much contained in an
Yeah.
envelope this size. It's kind of amazing. My mother had hinted at that there had been a former marriage in Poland. She never, and really, as I give these feelings to Charlotte, as a youngster, and I think this is true, it was true about my mother's life story too, I wasn't really interested. You know, I didn't want to, certainly I didn't want to have any imperfections or flaws associated with my father, because he was there to be idolized as the perfect person. But even with my mother, there were things, I mean, I only concentrate that when she died, I found this thing, High's Past, but I also found a lot about her. You know, I found out that she was a pinup girl in World War II and photographed. You know, I think when your parents pass away, you come into a whole new relationship with them because they become kind of the people they were before they were your mother or your father, and you're open to those people. And so it's, for a writer, it's just incredible grist for the mill. At least for me, no one fascinates me more. You know, Joyce Carol Oates once said that the reason we write is out of homesickness. And I related to that because I think there's just this need to recapture, to understand, and what more intimate relationship do you ever have than the one you had with your parents? I mean, you know, it's kind of amazing.
You know, there was a lot of, in the book, you talk about Poland a lot,
Yeah,
and there was a lot of details. How did you get all that information? I mean,
I went to Poland. You know, it was interesting. I won a raffle actually at Jeff's, one of Jeff's high school reunions, and it was a trip to Switzerland. And of course, his classmates were pissed off because I didn't go to the school. Like, who is she to get this ticket to Switzerland? But they were gracious enough, and it did include, you know, it was for two. And
so you took him?
I took him. I did. Yes. An alumnus. Bona fide alumnus got to go on the trip. So from Zurich to Warsaw was not a big trip at all. And as we were landing, it was just the most, and I just couldn't believe I was there. It was just remarkable. And that whole visit to Poland was a whole other story, which when I give a longer presentation I include, but I can't do it now. But I will say this, that of course, there's a lot of research in this book. There's a lot about the 1930s, which are an amazing decade, rich with history and culture and music and movies and, you know, Nazism and dust storms and just all kinds of things. So the amount of research you can accomplish with the internet, which I fought for years and years, is unbelievable. But there's nothing like going to the source. So for instance, I had read a lot about Poland, and I'd questioned my couple of cousins I have who were from there, but no one had ever mentioned the storks. Now storks are a symbol of good luck in Poland, and their nests and their gigantic nests are all over the place, on top of poles and rooftops and everything, and they're considered good luck, and this had never been mentioned. So that was just an example of a detail but I wanted to smell it. I wanted to smell the trees, and in fact the very, very nice and knowledgeable man who was taking us around, who was kind of like right out of the Jonathan Safir Foer book, All Things Are Illuminated. Is that his? Yeah, that's the title, All Things Are Illuminated. You know, there is a certain industry over there in Poland of Jews coming back, and they want to see their household and. But and he was terrific. He knew a lot of stuff. He took us to the Lukoff government office where I found the marriage certificate. You know, so it was an amazing thing. But I kept asking him, what kind of tree is that? What kind of tree is that? I wanted to know the trees. I wanted to know the flowers and the agricultural produce. And he was good with that, with the but the trees, it just was annoying him. Like, you know, I studied up all this stuff on the Holocaust, and this American woman is asking me what kind of tree is So what I did is I took some of the leaves and I went to Tree People, which is a place in Los Angeles, and I just presented the leaves to some of the tree experts there and found linden tree and cottonwood tree.
Wow.
And so I was able to place those trees in the story. In fact, I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do have audio-visual aids. You'll find this amazing. I'm sure I'll one day be stopped for this.
Well, if you do it while driving.
So here's like the remnants of one of the leaves, actually. And if I I can smell Poland in there. Amazing. So, in fact, when I saw it because it's a new purse, I didn't take this purse to Poland, but I thought, oh my God, did I have grass? What's going on? And then I remembered that it was a Polish leaf. Innocent.
Elyce, was there any remnants of the shtetls in Poland when you were there, or is it all the places you visited?
No, the place where my father grew up in Stawki was literally the intersection of 6 dirt roads. That was the town. And it sure looked like a shtetl to me. It looked straight out of Fiddler on the Roof. But it turns out it was mostly a Gentile neighborhood because those little thatched houses were just, how most rural people live. There was some, it was really a kind of integrated neighborhood. And the house that he grew up in was shared by the Wakermans and another family who were Polish Gentiles, which is just unheard of. But yes, you definitely get the flavor. You've been there, right? Have you been back?
I went to Krakow. I
Okay.
didn't go to
The rural
the
areas.
towns my parents came from.
Right.
But we did go to my husband's place in Lvov, outside of Lvov, and that area, Star-Sumburg, still had the shtetl,
Yeah.
And it was very interesting, that whole trip. But,
Yeah, it's an amazing
Mhm.
trip. More and more people are embarking on that trip. So, anything else? Questions about the, yeah?
I just found it, this is kind of an aside, but I'm interested in the attorney that's doing the questioning and his motive out of Iowa to go to New York and question incoming immigrants.
He studies law. He, as a young man, wanted very much to fight in the World War. By the way, it was not called World War I because no one knew there was going to be another war. So it was called the World War. And he's not tall of stature. I just pictured him that way, and maybe it's short man's power syndrome, whatever. But that's how I pictured him.
Interesting perspective, though, it makes it a little different.
So I thought maybe he was too short to be in the war. So again, on the internet, I found a place called, ask.military.com, and this fabulous guy got back in touch with me and told me that at 5'4", Will Brown could have gotten into the Army. Okay. All right. And then it turns out that his father, Nicholas, had a heart condition, and so since he was the only son, he was deemed, it was necessary for him to stay with his father and mother. But he has always had this yearning to fight for his country. And the way he sees the path to doing that for him is to make sure that elements who are going to ruin it for the people already here are, have to do it straight and narrow and not be cheating to get in. And I don't see Will. Obviously my politics are probably more with the immigrant, and especially now, the way this guy is riling me up. I won't say his name, but, But I think that although there's the oversight of the fact, and that's why I do make Will and his family actually not necessarily of purebred WASP descent. Everyone here is an immigrant, right? And, except for maybe those who were slaves, okay, or those who own the land and who we just pillaged it. So to say I want to keep it pure for real Americans is just really a misjudgment. But I think his intentions are good, and he wants to do what he can for America. That's kind of his motivation. And I'm hoping that he does not come off, and I know a few of you have already read the book, I'm hoping that he doesn't come off as a stock villain, you know, that we see his humanity. We see that he loves his family, and he's trying to do the right thing. So,
I don't think he comes across as a villain at all.
thank you, Robert. Now, Robert Carfield, I grew up with in my neighborhood, but so it's like various phases of my life are here today. My life is flashing before me.
But according to your husband, it's only 20 years.
Yeah. Why did you say I was 40?
I didn't even give that number.
Okay, so.
Thank you so much, Elyce. This has been
Thank you.
absolutely